over fields of green, remembering the faces, the moments unseen, the hands that built a dynasty, the vision in their eyes, echoes in the auction barn beneath an endless sky. This is the Bullvine, turn the volume high, for the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew, hear their stories now, coming right on through.
Welcome to the Bullvine podcast, the show that digs deep into the stories, the people, and the genetics that define the dairy industry. In a business that's always chasing the next big thing, we're going to tell you a story about a family that built a legacy, one careful step at a time. This is the story of a genetic revolution that began not with fanfare, but with a quiet heifer in an Iowa show ring. The story of Regancrest-PR Barbie, a cow that would prove that the most lasting impact comes from understanding that greatness is built, not found. You're standing in the Minnesota State Fair ring on a sweltering August morning in 2004. The sawdust beneath your boots smells of livestock and anticipation. Around you, the familiar sounds of a Holstein show, cattle lowing, halters jingling, exhibitors calling out encouragement to their animals. Your eyes are drawn to a sleek black and white heifer making her way around the ring. She moves with that certain presence you've learned to recognize after decades in the dairy business. Nothing flashy, nothing that screams champion, but something in the way she carries herself makes you pause your conversation with the breeder standing next to you. "Nice heifer," you mutter, more to yourself than to him. The judge's hand moves decisively. Reserve Grand Champion, a solid placement. The crowd appreciates the choice. You nod approvingly. She deserved it. Just another promising young cow in another show string. But you're about to witness something that won't become clear for years. Something that will fundamentally change how you think about genetic value, breeding decisions, and what it means to build a lasting legacy in the dairy business. Because that heifer you just watched, Regancrest-PR Barbie, is about to prove that sometimes the most profound changes in agriculture don't announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes they stand quietly in a show ring, waiting for time to reveal their true impact. 20 years later, that cow's genetics will command $1.5 million at auction. Her descendants will control more than a third of the elite type rankings in the Holstein breed. And you'll realize that what you witnessed that day in Minnesota wasn't just another show. It was the beginning of a genetic revolution that would reshape modern dairy breeding. This is the story of how one Iowa family's methodical approach to cattle breeding created the most valuable genetics on Earth. How systematic planning over 8 generations produced an alignment of stars that continues to influence your breeding decisions today. And how the intersection of science, patience, and agricultural intuition proved that in an industry obsessed with the next big thing, the most lasting impact comes from understanding that greatness is built one generation at a time. You step into the farm office, where 3 generations of breeding records line the walls. The earliest volumes, leather-bound and handwritten, document William Regan's first cattle purchases in 1951. The progression tells the story of American dairy genetics, from foundation cows with modest production records to the sophisticated breeding programs that would define modern Holstein improvement. William Regan wasn't born into the cattle business. His father farmed corn and soybeans on rented ground, scratching out a living that depended entirely on weather and commodity prices. But William saw something different in registered Holsteins. He understood, perhaps better than his neighbors, that genetics represented the one asset that could appreciate while you owned it. His first significant purchase, Zub's Ormsby Fane EX90, cost him $750 in 1952, more than many farmers paid for their entire foundation herd. His wife Angela questioned the wisdom of spending so much on a single animal. But William had studied the bloodlines. He understood that Fane represented genetic potential that would compound across generations. You run your finger along the breeding chart that shows Fane's influence spreading through 8 generations of careful selection. Every mating was planned with military precision. William didn't breed for fashion or show ring success alone. He bred for genetic transmission ability, the capacity to consistently pass superior traits to offspring. The operation grew methodically. By 1970, Regancrest was producing bulls for artificial insemination. By 1980, their cattle were winning at state and national shows. But success never changed the fundamental philosophy: systematic improvement over generations, not shortcuts or quick fixes. Frank Regan, William's son, absorbed these lessons from childhood. You can picture him as a boy, following his father through the breeding barn, learning to evaluate udder attachments and rear leg angles before he could properly pronounce conformation. The knowledge that most breeders acquired through trial and error, Frank inherited as gospel truth. But it's Frank's daughter Sherry who represents the culmination of this genetic education. Born in 1975, she grew up during the most transformative period in dairy breeding history. Artificial insemination was becoming routine. PTAT evaluations were revolutionizing how breeders measured genetic worth. The tools for genetic improvement were more sophisticated than ever, but they still required the foundational knowledge that only comes from generations of hands-on experience. At a young age, I had a great passion for showing cows and the registered Holstein part of our family's business, Sherry would later recall. But it was more than passion. It was education in the truest sense, learning to read pedigrees like literature, understanding how specific bloodlines complemented each other, recognizing the genetic patterns that created exceptional cattle. You examine the breeding records from the 1990s, where Sherry's influence becomes evident. The matings become even more precise, more strategic. She understood something that many breeders missed. The most valuable genetics weren't necessarily the most fashionable. They were the ones that consistently transmitted superior traits across multiple generations. By 2001, when Regancrest-PR Barbie was born, the family had developed what they called their Durham Project, a concentrated effort to combine the genetic strengths of Durham EX90 GMD with their own carefully curated bloodlines. Durham was the leading sire of excellent cows in the United States, with over 4,400 daughters achieving the breed's highest classification. But more importantly, Durham represented the genetic consistency that Regancrest valued above all else. The emotional weight of this breeding program extended far beyond economics. Each generation of Regans understood that they were stewards of something larger than their individual operation. They were preserving and improving genetic resources that would influence the Holstein breed for decades to come. The pressure was immense. Every breeding decision carried the weight of 50 years of systematic improvement. You can feel this responsibility as you stand in the breeding barn where Barbie took her first breath. The accumulated knowledge of 3 generations, the careful selection of bloodlines, the systematic approach to genetic improvement, all of it culminating in a single calf whose influence would eventually reach far beyond the rolling hills of Iowa. Frank's simple statement encapsulates the family philosophy. I just want to breed bulls that will improve herds for people everywhere. Not a quest for personal glory or show ring success, but a genuine commitment to genetic improvement that would benefit the entire industry. This sense of mission, combined with unparalleled technical expertise, created the environment where exceptional genetics could flourish. You're checking the maternity pen on a cool May morning when you notice the Durham X Juror X Aerostar X Chief Mark calf that arrived 3 days ago. Nothing particularly remarkable about her appearance. Standard Holstein coloring, good size for a newborn, alert and healthy. But her pedigree represents the culmination of the Regan family's most ambitious breeding project. The calf that will become known as Regancrest-PR Barbie carries the genetic legacy of 8 generations of systematic breeding. But in May 2001, she's simply another heifer calf requiring the same care and attention as the rest of the nursery. You help Sherry with the morning feeding, measuring out milk replacer with the precision that separates successful operations from those that merely survive. The challenges begin immediately. Barbie doesn't show the rapid early growth that often indicates exceptional potential. Her feed conversion is adequate, but not outstanding. Her frame development follows normal patterns without the dramatic size increase that catches breeders' attention. In an industry where first impressions often determine an animal's future, Barbie presents as competent but not remarkable. You watch Sherry make notes in the breeding records, documenting every detail of Barbie's early development. Height measurements, feed intake, health observations, the kind of meticulous record-keeping that allows successful breeders to identify patterns that others miss. But even Sherry acknowledges that Barbie isn't showing obvious signs of the genetic superiority her pedigree suggests. The first real test comes at weaning. Many calves struggle with the transition from milk to solid feed, and poor performance during this critical period often indicates fundamental problems with genetic potential. You help move Barbie to the weaning pen, watching for signs of stress or illness that could derail her development. She adapts normally, not exceptionally, but without the setbacks that eliminate many prospects from breeding consideration. Her feed intake remains consistent. Her growth curve follows predictable patterns. She integrates well with the other heifers in her peer group. All positive indicators, but nothing that suggests the extraordinary genetic potential her bloodlines theoretically possess. The economic pressures of 2001 to 2002 add another layer of complexity to Barbie's development. Milk prices remain volatile, feed costs increase steadily, and the consolidation of dairy operations continues to eliminate marginal producers. Every investment in genetic improvement must be justified by concrete returns. Raising replacement heifers costs approximately $1,800 per animal through first breeding. Maintaining animals that don't demonstrate clear genetic superiority becomes increasingly difficult to justify. You attend breeding meetings where the conversation consistently returns to the same themes: genetic efficiency, proven transmission ability, measurable improvement in offspring performance. The pressure to cull aggressively increases with every month of poor milk prices. Animals that might have been retained for additional evaluation in better economic times face elimination if they don't demonstrate clear superiority. Barbie survives these culling decisions, but not because she stands out dramatically from her contemporaries. She survives because the Regan family understands that genetic potential often develops gradually, and because their systematic approach to breeding requires patience that many operations can't afford. The first significant evaluation comes at 6 months, when Barbie undergoes linear scoring for type traits. This process measures dozens of conformation characteristics that contribute to overall genetic value. Udder development, frame size, locomotion, breed character, every aspect of her physical development is quantified and compared to breed standards. Barbie scores well above average in several key areas. Her mammary system shows excellent early development. Her frame indicates good adult size potential. Her movement suggests soundness that should translate to longevity. But these are incremental advantages, not the dramatic superiority that immediately identifies exceptional genetics. You help load Barbie and her contemporaries for their first show, a county-level competition that serves more as educational experience than serious genetic evaluation. The judging confirms what linear scoring suggested. Barbie possesses good to very good type characteristics without the exceptional qualities that create immediate market excitement. The challenge becomes more acute as Barbie approaches breeding age. The decision of which sire to use for her first mating will influence her production potential and the genetic value of her offspring. In 2003, with genomic evaluation still years away, these breeding decisions depend entirely on pedigree analysis, performance records, and breeder intuition developed over decades of experience. The Regan family chooses carefully, selecting a sire that complements Barbie's bloodlines while maintaining the genetic consistency that defines their breeding program. But even this decision carries risk. The investment in artificial insemination, pregnancy monitoring, and heifer development continues to accumulate without guarantee of return. As Barbie approaches her first calving, the question that haunts every dairy breeder intensifies. Have we properly identified genetic potential, Or are we maintaining an animal whose ultimate value won't justify the investment? The answer lies months in the future, when lactation performance and type classification will provide the first definitive measurement of Barbie's genetic worth. You're attending the annual meeting where the most significant changes in dairy genetics evaluation are being debated. The PowerPoint presentations and statistical analyses being discussed will fundamentally alter how genetic merit is measured and how breeding decisions are made across the industry. The introduction of PTAT, predicted transmitting ability for type, represents the most sophisticated genetic evaluation system ever developed for dairy cattle. Unlike previous systems that relied primarily on individual performance records, PTAT incorporates complex mathematical models that predict an animal's ability to transmit genetic superiority to offspring. The implications for breeding strategy are profound. You study the charts showing PTAT distributions across the Holstein population. The difference between a cow with plus 2.0 PTAT and plus 3.0 PTAT translates to significant advantages in offspring type classification. More importantly, these advantages compound across generations. A systematic breeding program that consistently utilizes high PTAT genetics can achieve genetic progress that would have been impossible under previous evaluation systems. But PTAT also introduces new complexities. The statistical models require large amounts of data to produce reliable predictions. Young animals without extensive offspring records receive genomic evaluations based on pedigree information and limited performance data. The accuracy of these predictions improves over time, but early breeding decisions must still be made with incomplete information. The economic implications become clear as you review market data from major genetic sales. Cattle with proven high PTAT ratings command premium prices that reflect their genetic value. Regancrest-PR Barbie, one of the first daughters to achieve exceptional PTAT rankings, sells for prices that seemed impossible just years earlier. The market has recognized that genetic transmission ability represents tangible economic value. You examine breeding trends across the industry, where the most successful operations are systematically incorporating high PTAT genetics into their programs. The traditional approach of breeding for individual performance is being replaced by strategies that prioritize genetic transmission ability. Operations that adapt quickly to these changes gain competitive advantages that compound over time. The technological infrastructure supporting genetic evaluation continues to expand. Artificial insemination companies invest heavily in genetic testing and data collection. University research programs develop increasingly sophisticated statistical models for predicting genetic merit. The resources available for genetic improvement in 2003 dwarf anything available to previous generations of breeders. But technology alone doesn't guarantee success. The most valuable genetics still emerge from operations that combine advanced evaluation tools with fundamental breeding expertise developed over generations. The Regan family's systematic approach to genetic improvement, refined over 50 years of careful selection, positions them to maximize the benefits of improved evaluation systems. You review genetic trends in the Holstein breed, where the influence of a relatively small number of superior sires creates genetic bottlenecks that concern industry leaders. Walkway Chief Mark, the sire appearing 3 times in Barbie's pedigree, has influenced such a large portion of the breed that inbreeding becomes an increasing concern. Future breeding strategies must balance genetic progress with the need to maintain genetic diversity. The international dimensions of genetic improvement add another layer of complexity. Superior genetics developed in North America are being exported to dairy industries worldwide. Conversely, genetic resources from other countries contribute to domestic breeding programs. The most successful genetics will have global impact that extends far beyond their origins. As you leave the conference, you understand that the dairy genetics industry stands at an inflection point. The tools for genetic evaluation have never been more sophisticated. The economic rewards for superior genetics have never been greater. But success still requires the fundamental breeding expertise that separates true genetic improvement from statistical manipulation. The operations that thrive in this new environment will be those that combine advanced evaluation systems with systematic breeding programs built over generations. They will understand that sustainable genetic improvement requires patience, consistency, and the willingness to make long-term investments that may not yield immediate returns. This is the environment in which Regancrest-PR Barbie will be evaluated. Her genetic potential, carefully developed through 8 generations of systematic breeding, will be measured against the most sophisticated evaluation criteria ever developed. The stakes are higher than ever, but so is the potential for creating genetic resources that will influence the industry for decades to come. You're studying the detailed genetic analysis that explains why Barbie became such an exceptional breeding animal. The laboratory reports spread across the conference table represent the most sophisticated genetic evaluation ever conducted on a dairy cow. Every chromosome, every genetic marker, every inherited trait has been mapped and quantified with scientific precision. The genetic map reveals the alignment of stars that created Barbie's exceptional transmission ability. Walkway Chief Mark appears 3 times in her pedigree, but not randomly. Each appearance occurs at genetic locations that reinforce specific traits while avoiding the inbreeding depression that typically results from concentrated line breeding. The Regan family's systematic approach achieved genetic concentration without sacrificing genetic health. You examine the molecular markers that indicate Barbie's ability to transmit superior udder conformation. The genes controlling mammary system development show favorable allelic combinations that occur rarely in the general population. When she passes these genetic combinations to offspring, the results consistently produce superior mammary systems regardless of the complementary genetics contributed by sires. The statistical models that calculate PTAT ratings become clearer as you review the mathematical algorithms. Barbie's genetic evaluation incorporates not just her individual performance, but the performance of all relatives in her pedigree, weighted by their genetic relationships and adjusted for environmental influences. The resulting prediction of her transmission ability represents the collective genetic potential of 8 generations of systematic selection. But the science only explains part of Barbie's success. The art lies in how the Regan family recognized genetic potential before sophisticated evaluation systems confirmed it. Their ability to identify superior genetics through visual appraisal, pedigree analysis, and breeding intuition represents knowledge that can't be reduced to statistical models. You interview Sherry Regan about the selection decisions that led to Barbie's development. Her explanations reveal the integration of scientific knowledge with practical experience that separates exceptional breeders from those who merely follow genetic recommendations. She understood, intuitively, how specific bloodlines would complement each other before genetic analysis proved her conclusions correct. The breeding philosophy that created Barbie emphasizes consistency over extremes. Rather than seeking maximum development in individual traits, the Regan family bred for balanced excellence that would transmit reliably across multiple generations. This approach requires patience and long-term commitment that few breeding programs maintain successfully. The genetic mechanisms that produce exceptional transmission ability remain partially mysterious despite sophisticated analysis. While specific genes can be identified and mapped, the interactions between multiple genetic systems that create overall genetic merit represent complexity that challenges current scientific understanding. The most successful breeders, like the Regan family, often recognize genetic potential through methods that science can't fully explain. You study the environmental factors that influenced Barbie's genetic expression. Nutrition, health management, housing conditions, and stress levels all affect how genetic potential translates to measurable performance. The Regancrest operation provided optimal conditions for genetic expression, but their management philosophy emphasizes practices that allow genetic potential to be realized rather than forcing artificial performance levels. The economic analysis of genetic transmission reveals why Barbie's genetics command premium prices. Each daughter she produces carries genetic potential worth thousands of dollars in lifetime production and genetic value. The compounding effect of genetic superiority across multiple generations creates wealth accumulation that exceeds returns available from any other agricultural investment. The psychological aspects of genetic transmission add another dimension to Barbie's story. The confidence that comes from proven genetic superiority influences management decisions throughout her productive life. Knowing that every offspring carries exceptional genetic potential justifies investments in nutrition, healthcare, and breeding strategy that might not be economically viable for ordinary animals. You examine the breeding records that document every mating decision involving Barbie's genetics. Each selection reflects careful analysis of how specific sires will complement her genetic strengths while maintaining the consistency that created her exceptional transmission ability. The accumulated knowledge required for these decisions represents expertise developed over generations of systematic breeding. The global implications of Barbie's genetic contribution become apparent as you review international breeding programs that incorporate her genetics. Artificial insemination allows genetic resources to influence breeding programs worldwide within months of their identification. The most superior genetics developed in Iowa can improve dairy herds from Canada to New Zealand with remarkable speed. The responsibility that accompanies genetic superiority weighs heavily on breeding decisions involving Barbie's genetics. Each mating represents an opportunity to improve the Holstein breed permanently or to waste genetic resources that may not be replicated. The ethical dimensions of genetic stewardship require breeding strategies that prioritize long-term genetic improvement over short-term economic gains. As you conclude your analysis, you understand that Barbie represents the convergence of scientific advancement with traditional breeding expertise. Her genetic superiority couldn't have been achieved without sophisticated evaluation systems, but it also required the intuitive understanding of genetic relationships that comes only from generations of hands-on experience. The combination of science and art that created her success provides a model for genetic improvement that will influence breeding strategies for decades to come. You're walking through the maternity barn where Barbie's third crop of daughters is beginning to arrive. Each newborn calf represents a genetic experiment with implications that extend far beyond the Regancrest operation. The early results have exceeded expectations, but the real test of Barbie's genetic superiority lies in the consistent performance of multiple generations of offspring. The first daughters are reaching milking age, and their performance records validate every prediction made by the PTAT evaluation system. Of the first 15 daughters, 14 classify very good or better on first lactation, a consistency rate that challenges statistical probability. But more significantly, their production records show the genetic efficiency that translates directly to economic advantage. You help with the morning milking, watching Barbie's daughters demonstrate the mammary system excellence that their genetic evaluation predicted. Udder attachments remain strong through multiple lactations. Milk flow rates optimize parlor efficiency. Somatic cell counts remain low despite high production levels. Every characteristic that influences profitable milk production shows genetic improvement that can be traced directly to Barbie's transmission ability. The excitement builds as classification results continue to arrive. Regancrest-G Bedazzle, Barbie's first daughter by Goldwyn, achieves the #1 PTAT cow ranking, the first offspring to surpass her mother's genetic evaluation. The achievement validates the breeding strategy that created Barbie while demonstrating that genetic progress continues across generations when superior genetics are properly managed. But the real breakthrough comes when the artificial insemination industry expresses serious interest in Barbie's sons. Braxton and Baltimore, both sired by Shottle, demonstrate the genetic consistency that makes superior sires identifiable before extensive progeny testing confirms their merit. The combination of Barbie's transmission ability with Shottle's proven genetics creates offspring with genetic potential that attracts international attention. You attend genetic evaluations where Barbie's sons receive genomic assessments that place them among the most promising young sires in the Holstein breed. The accuracy of these early predictions depends partly on their mother's proven transmission ability. Barbie's genetic contribution provides confidence that allows the artificial insemination industry to invest in her sons before traditional progeny testing would confirm their merit. The economic implications become staggering as inquiries arrive from genetic buyers worldwide. Barbie's daughters command prices that seemed impossible just years earlier. But more significantly, her sons represent genetic resources with potential global impact. The decision of which artificial insemination company will purchase their genetic rights determines how widely Barbie's genetics will influence international breeding programs. The pressure intensifies as the 2008 World Dairy Expo approaches. Barbie's daughters will compete against the best genetics from operations across North America and internationally. The judging represents the most definitive evaluation of her genetic contribution to type improvement in the Holstein breed. Success will validate the systematic breeding program that created her genetics. Poor performance will raise questions about whether genetic evaluations accurately predict breeding value. You help prepare multiple daughters for the competition, each representing different aspects of Barbie's genetic transmission. Some emphasize mammary system excellence. Others demonstrate the frame development and dairy character that contribute to overall genetic merit. Together, they provide a comprehensive evaluation of her ability to transmit the balanced excellence that defines truly superior genetics. The show preparation reveals the depth of genetic consistency that separates exceptional breeding animals from those that produce only occasional superior offspring. Every daughter demonstrates type characteristics that reflect Barbie's genetic influence, while showing individual variation that indicates genetic health rather than inbreeding depression. The balance between consistency and variation suggests genetic robustness that will maintain quality across multiple generations. As competition day arrives, you understand that more than individual achievements are being evaluated. The performance of Barbie's daughters will influence breeding strategies across the industry. Success will encourage other operations to adopt similar systematic approaches to genetic improvement. Poor results will support arguments that genetic evaluation systems produce statistical artifacts rather than meaningful breeding progress. The judging proceeds with the methodical evaluation that characterizes major genetic competitions. Each animal is assessed for the traits that contribute to genetic merit: mammary system development, frame characteristics, locomotion, breed character, and overall genetic balance. The judge's decisions reflect not just individual merit, but the genetic potential that each animal represents for future breeding programs. The results exceed expectations. Multiple daughters place highly in their respective classes. The consistency of type excellence demonstrates genetic transmission that validates both the evaluation systems and the breeding strategies that created Barbie's genetics. The industry recognition confirms that the Regancrest breeding program has produced genetic resources with lasting impact on Holstein improvement. But perhaps the most significant moment comes during the evening genetics seminar, where industry experts discuss the implications of Barbie's genetic contribution. The consensus emerges that she represents a breakthrough in understanding how genetic transmission ability can be identified, developed, and utilized for systematic breed improvement. Her success provides a model that other operations can adapt to their specific genetic resources and breeding objectives. The realization dawns that you've witnessed something historically significant. Barbie's genetic contribution represents more than individual success. It demonstrates how systematic breeding programs can create genetic resources that influence entire breeds. The implications for dairy industry development extend far beyond the specific genetics she contributed to, encompass the methods and strategies that created her genetic superiority. As 2009 approaches, you understand that Barbie's story has reached a crucial transition point. Her genetic merit has been validated by offspring performance and industry recognition. But the ultimate test lies ahead: whether her genetic contribution will influence the industry permanently or represent an exceptional but isolated achievement. The answer depends on how effectively her genetics are utilized by breeding programs worldwide and whether the methods that created her success can be replicated by other operations. You're witnessing the most revolutionary change in dairy genetics evaluation since the development of artificial insemination. The first genomic evaluations are being released, and the industry holds its breath to see whether this new technology will validate existing genetic hierarchies or completely reorganize how genetic merit is understood and utilized. The genomic evaluation of Barbie's genetics provides the most comprehensive genetic analysis ever conducted on a dairy cow. Every chromosome is mapped, every genetic marker analyzed, every inherited trait quantified with precision that was impossible just months earlier. The results validate every prediction made by traditional evaluation systems, while revealing genetic mechanisms that explain her exceptional transmission ability. But more importantly, the genomic analysis of Barbie's offspring provides unprecedented insight into how superior genetics transmit across generations. The DNA profiles of her daughters show genetic consistency that occurs rarely in outbred populations. The specific combinations of genetic markers that create superior mammary systems, frame development, and overall type excellence can now be identified at the molecular level. You study the genetic maps that reveal why Barbie became such an exceptional breeding animal. The alignment of stars that the Regan family achieved through systematic line breeding created genetic combinations that genomic analysis shows occur in less than 1% of the Holstein population. The concentration of favorable genetic variants reached levels that traditional breeding programs achieve rarely, if ever. The genomic evaluation of Barbie's sons provides even more dramatic revelations. Bulls like Gold Chip, Colt 45, and Bradnick demonstrate genetic profiles that place them among the most superior young sires ever identified. But unlike traditional evaluation systems that required years of progeny testing to confirm genetic merit, genomic analysis identifies their genetic superiority immediately upon DNA testing. The implications for the artificial insemination industry are profound. Genetic resources that would have required 5 years of traditional evaluation can now be identified and utilized within months of birth. Barbie's sons enter AI service at ages that would have been impossible under previous systems, accelerating the genetic progress they can achieve across the breed. You attend industry meetings where genetic companies compete aggressively for access to Barbie's genetics. The genomic evaluations have confirmed that her genetic resources represent some of the most valuable breeding assets in the Holstein breed. The economic value of exclusive genetic rights reaches levels that seemed impossible under traditional evaluation systems. The international demand for Barbie's genetics creates opportunities that extend far beyond North American breeding programs. Artificial insemination companies export semen from her sons to dairy industries worldwide. Embryo transfer programs distribute her daughters to operations seeking to upgrade genetic merit rapidly. The genetic influence that began on an Iowa dairy farm spreads globally within months of genomic identification. But perhaps the most significant development is the realization that genomic technology amplifies rather than replaces the genetic excellence that traditional breeding programs create. Operations like Regancrest, that developed superior genetics through systematic breeding over generations, find their genetic resources more valuable than ever. The new technology identifies and quantifies genetic merit that was developed through methods that genomics can analyze but not replicate. The competitive advantage shifts to operations that combine superior genetic resources with genomic evaluation capabilities. Having exceptional genetics like Barbie provides the raw material for genetic progress, but genomic analysis maximizes the utilization of that genetic potential. The most successful breeding programs integrate both resources to achieve genetic progress that neither traditional methods nor genomic technology can accomplish independently. The market validation comes through genetic sales that establish new price benchmarks for superior genetics. Regancrest-P Brocade sells with offspring for $900,000, a price that reflects not just individual merit, but the genetic potential that genomic evaluation confirms her offspring will possess. The sale demonstrates that genetic transmission ability commands economic value that justifies investments that seemed unrealistic under previous evaluation systems. The success creates new pressures and responsibilities for the Regancrest operation. Managing genetic resources worth millions of dollars requires strategic planning that extends far beyond traditional farming operations. Every breeding decision influences genetic resources that may affect the Holstein breed for decades. The responsibility for stewarding such valuable genetics weighs heavily on every management choice. You help develop breeding plans that maximize Barbie's genetic contribution while maintaining the genetic diversity necessary for sustainable breed improvement. The decisions must balance short-term economic opportunities with long-term genetic consequences. Overutilizing superior genetics can create genetic bottlenecks that compromise breed health. Underutilizing them wastes genetic resources that could accelerate breed improvement. The genomic revolution also reveals the mechanisms behind Barbie's genetic success, providing insights that inform future breeding strategies. The specific genetic pathways that create superior mammary systems can now be identified and selected systematically. The molecular basis for genetic transmission ability becomes understood rather than intuitive. Future breeding programs can build on this knowledge to achieve genetic progress that surpasses even Barbie's exceptional contribution. As 2012 approaches, you recognize that Barbie's genetic impact has reached levels that seemed impossible when she was born 11 years earlier. Her influence extends from the original matings on an Iowa farm to genetic programs worldwide. The genomic revolution has amplified her genetic contribution beyond what any traditional evaluation system could have achieved. But more significantly, Barbie's success has validated breeding philosophies that emphasize systematic genetic improvement over generations rather than short-term selection for fashionable traits. Her genetic superiority emerged from breeding strategies that prioritized genetic transmission ability before the tools existed to measure it accurately. The lesson for future genetic improvement is clear. Superior genetics result from long-term commitment to systematic breeding rather than reliance on evaluation systems alone. The realization emerges that you've witnessed not just individual genetic success, but a transformation in how genetic resources are developed, identified, and utilized across the dairy industry. Barbie's story demonstrates that exceptional genetics result from the integration of systematic breeding expertise with advanced evaluation technologies. Neither traditional methods nor genomic capabilities alone can achieve the genetic progress that their combination makes possible. You're standing in the same maternity barn where Barbie was born 11 years earlier, but you're not here to welcome new arrivals. You're here to say goodbye. Barbie's productive life has ended, and her death marks the conclusion of one of the most influential genetic contributions in Holstein breed history. The emotional weight of the moment extends far beyond the loss of a single animal. Barbie represents the culmination of 60 years of systematic breeding, the validation of genetic strategies that challenged conventional wisdom, and the proof that patient, methodical approach to genetic improvement can create resources that influence entire breeds. Her death closes one chapter while opening another that will determine how effectively her genetic legacy continues to impact the dairy industry. You help inventory the genetic resources that constitute Barbie's legacy. 27 daughters, all but one classified very good or better. 8 daughters achieving excellent classification, a consistency rate that challenges statistical probability. Multiple sons proven in artificial insemination with genetic evaluations that place them among the breed's most influential sires. The economic value of this genetic empire exceeds anything the Regan family imagined when they planned the matings that created Barbie. But the numbers only hint at the broader impact of Barbie's genetic contribution. Her influence extends through multiple generations of descendants who continue to shape Holstein breeding worldwide. Grandsons like M.R. Atwood Brokaw carry her genetic influence into breeding programs that never directly utilized her genetics, but benefit from the genetic improvement she initiated. The market consequences of Barbie's genetic success reshape how the industry values breeding animals. Regancrest-S Chastity, one of her daughters, sells with offspring for $1.5 million, a price that establishes new benchmarks for genetic value. These sales demonstrate that genetic transmission ability commands economic premiums that justify breeding strategies that prioritize long-term genetic improvement over short-term production gains. The artificial insemination industry has been permanently altered by the genetic resources that emerged from Barbie's breeding program. Bulls like Goldchip, Bradnick, and Cashcoin become foundational sires whose genetic influence appears in pedigrees worldwide. The genetic progress they achieve accelerates breed improvement beyond what any single operation could accomplish through traditional breeding programs alone. The international implications of Barbie's genetic contribution become apparent as breeding programs worldwide incorporate her genetics through artificial insemination and embryo transfer. Dairy operations from Canada to New Zealand utilize genetic resources that originated on an Iowa farm, demonstrating how superior genetics transcend geographic boundaries when properly identified and distributed. You attend genetic conferences where Barbie's breeding program is analyzed as a case study in systematic genetic improvement. The methods that created her genetic superiority provide a model that other operations attempt to replicate using their own genetic resources. And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Bullvine podcast. The story of Regancrest-PR Barbie is more than a tale of a single cow. It's a masterclass in long-term thinking, a testament to the power of patience, and a reminder that the most revolutionary genetics often come from the most humble of places. The next time you see a top-ranked sire or an impressive show cow, remember the Regan family and the alignment of stars they created in Iowa. Their work continues to influence the future of dairy breeding, one generation at a time. For the Bullvine podcast, I'm your host, and we'll see you next time.
This is the Bullvine. Turn the volume high for the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew. Hear their stories now, coming right on through. Oh, tell the tale, the Bullvine. Legends live here